Welcome, everybody. I think we can go ahead and start. Welcome to our CCCOER's November webinar. We're talking today about open education and Indigenous knowledge. I'll go ahead and advance the screen. We are the Community College Consortium for OER, which is a node of OE Global. And we represent millions of students and have a consortium of community colleges across North America. If you have some time at the end, we will put a survey in the link. If you would take a minute to fill that out just before you take off, that would be great. And we also invite you to be part of the CCCOER listserv, where you can get lots of more information. Lots of sharing going on. It's a very active listserv. So today we have Linda Chappelle and Anne-Marie Pai-Kai, and I'll let them introduce themselves. I am Lori Beth Larson, and I work with professional development with CCCOER, and we're very happy to have Linda and Anne-Marie. I'll let them introduce themselves further. Linda?
Hi, I'm Linda Chappelle. I am currently adjunct at Tohono O'odham Community College. Up till a year ago, I was full-time. I was the area chair at Tohono O'odham Community College, and I have 20 plus years in higher education, much of those as a department chair at another college. And now that I'm part-time, I get to do extra things like work on my OER and curriculum. In the past, I've done a lot of curriculum development, including at Tohono O'odham Community College, and worked on accreditation processes as both faculty and as the department chair. These are just a few things to show Tohono O'odham Community College, some of the projects that we've done and worked on, working with artists from the outside, working with tribal members who have knowledge in the traditional arts, as well as bringing in all types of different fine art projects. So our curriculum tries to envelop both. And primarily at this point, I'm teaching the art histories, and that's where I've done most work with the OER. So thank you, and nice to meet everybody.
Thanks, Linda. Happy you're here. And Anne-Marie, would you like to introduce yourself a little more?
Absolutely. Aloha mai kako, mahalo nui to CCCOER for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I'm excited to talk with you folks a little bit about Indigenous knowledge and OER. This slide is just a sort of a picture explanation of my journey into librarianship and to archives. It's also demonstrates some of the people that I'm responsible to and responsible for. I am currently the Hawaiian Collection Librarian at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, but I just started here in July and was recently at Leeward Community College on the island of Oahu for about 8 years. Prior to that, I was born and raised in the Bay Area, California. My father is from Honolulu, Hawaii. My mother is from a very small town in Kansas named Troy. They've raised my brother and I in the Bay Area. We grew up loving libraries. I had no idea what that my trajectory would end me up here, but I ended up coming here to University of Hawaii at Hilo for a Hawaiian Studies degree, working at this collection that I'm currently in now as a student worker, and that launched me into a career in libraries, getting my MLIS at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and then later starting to work in academic libraries at Leeward Community College. Also parts of my journey have really been informed by getting my Hawaiian Studies degree here in Hilo, at Kahakaula o Ke'alikolani, our Hawaiian Studies College here, as well as down at Hawaii Community College, where I learned, I was trained in hula under Mai Kumu Hula Taupori Tangaro, as well as Manaya Kalani Kalua. I also have two children, alongside my husband. Their names are Kapalua and Emalia, and they're both attending immersion school here in Hilo. So they're lucky enough to be going to school and learning Hawaiian language at school. And I'll get to talk about a little bit more about my professional projects and that sort of thing a little bit later on. But that's me.
Thanks. Also, very, very happy you're here too. All right. Linda, we're back to you. Would
Okay.
you explain your projects that you're working on?
So projects that I'm working on at Tohono O'odham Community College, we have an articulation agreement with IAI, which is the Indigenous College of the Arts outside of Santa Fe, and we also have agreements with the University of Arizona system. So in the past, working on maintaining those transfer credits and curriculum has been part of my job as department chair. And then I've continued to work on this. I was the department chair during COVID, so that's when we really started to push for OER across the curriculum more. Prior to that, I was working on it, but because of the restrictions, especially within the Western art history surveys, there's only so much you can sort of add in. But I had found several sources that included a wider global look at art history. So I've been working on that. And then newer projects, just as sort of fun projects, is that I've worked on a couple grants since I'm now not full-time. And I really work with helping my students work with galleries and places to show their art outside of the college as well as within their community. So we've gotten a few grants to work on projects such as that. But that's kind of outside of what we're speaking to, but primarily working on OER sources that include Indigenous voices and an Indigenous viewpoint, basically, for art history. So, okay. Oh, one more thing I almost forgot. Sorry. I'm sorry. I've also just started working with Amy Chen from IHEC on creating an ORE textbook for Native American art history. So that's kind of a big ongoing project, but I just started to work on that with her, which I'm very excited about as well. So thank you. Sorry.
That's all good. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Anne-Marie, did you want to talk a little bit about the projects that you're currently working on?
Yeah, mahalo. So my trajectory is a little bit less overtly working with OER, having worked at, oh, sorry, something's talking to me. Having worked at Leeward Community College, I was lucky enough to work under Wade Oshiro for a long time. And he is, as you may all know who he is or be familiar with his name, he's very, very, really has improved and made Leeward a leader within the University of Hawaii system with regard to OER. And so it was sort of inevitable that I would end up being part of the work that he does. And so I say that to say that I'll be talking a little bit about some of those projects that I was able to be a part of at Leeward, but a lot of the current work that I'm doing is less, again, overtly with OER, but I think there's still a lot of really distinct connections. As I said, I've very recently come into a new position here as the Hawaiian Collection Librarian here at the University of Hawaii at Hilo on Hawaii Island. This is a photo of our collection. We, in the spring, were renamed for one of our very revered kupuna, or elder. Her name is Auntie Edith Kanakaole, and she is from Keaukaha on this island. And she is an incredible teacher of hula, but also helped to set up both the Hawaiian Studies program here at UH Hilo as well as Hawaii ECC, and is very, very well known for her strong ability to have transmitted so much of our ancestral knowledge onto these future generations through her work as a hula practitioner and hula teacher, her group is still practicing today and continues to lead in being an innovator in those ways, but also as a teacher in these academic institutions of UH. And so we really, there's so much to say about her, but it's an honor to be able to be a caretaker of a collection that's named for her. And so I'm still very much learning my role here and my how building relationships with the faculty and staff on this campus. Another big project that I've been working on is primarily a grant funded, although we're working to get it institutionalized within the UH system, is work to develop a Hawaiian knowledge organization system. Essentially what this is centering Hawaiian knowledge within the realm of libraries to reorganize our libraries and improve description that has inherently been harmful within our metadata. And so that project is called Kawai Hapai. We do have a website, but we've been doing a lot of work working with scholars to develop better description practices, authority records to become subject headings to reorganize and rethink about the way that we organize our collections. Other work that I'm doing that's a little bit more OER centered has been definitely helping to localize a lot of the curriculum and the content within our courses, especially at Leeward. There's an example of a LibGuide there that's available at the Leeward Community College website that talks specifically about INA-based research and research resources about the area that Leeward is located on. And so that encompasses Keawalau Pu'uloa, which is better known as Pearl Harbor today, as well as the far leeward coast of Waianae, where we are no longer have the highest population of Native Hawaiians there, because we have recently found out that the highest population of Native Hawaiians is no longer in Hawaii, but actually in the continental United States, which is a very sad thing to report. But we do still have a very, very high Native Hawaiian population on that side. And so it's been really, really important for us to be able to develop and curate Hawaiian knowledge that can be applied into the classrooms, into the curriculum, and localizing a lot of our courses. Lastly, I'll just talk about another project that I'm working on with Wade, which has been to develop a learning community called the Difficult Knowledge Learning Community. One of our advisors, Iko Kosasa, is I believe she's a fourth generation immigrant to Hawaii, Japanese, who has done much of her professional work around settler colonialism. And so as our University of Hawaii campus talks about becoming an Indigenous serving university or a Native Hawaiian place of learning, much of the work that Wade and I have been doing has been working with faculty to create a book club and a learning community that talks about settler colonialism and what that means and how that shows up in our practices in the academy as faculty. And as most of our campuses have primarily faculty that do not necessarily represent the student population. Most of our faculty are not Native Hawaiian, whereas we have a very, very high Native Hawaiian student population at all of our campuses. And so what are the implications of that, and what are our roles in learning how to become an Indigenous serving university? And so that learning community has been a really important and impactful part of my work alongside Wade. So mahalo.
Thank you. And then we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges.
Good. So that was interesting that you talked about that idea of developing organization for the resources, because I think that is really important as you're putting together ORE, as well as like having that learning community. I think those are some of the resources actually that I'm talking about when I talk about the challenges of doing this. Especially as a non-native instructor at a native college, although we have many Indigenous instructors as well. Finding the resources in order to really have a correct approach is a challenge, I think, and also time, as it always is when you're an instructor and you're working on curriculum. Time is always a challenge. There's many things that call to us as area chairs and as faculty, but I really do think not just in Indigenous teaching situations, but I think across academia, really this should be prioritized. It's important. And I really feel that strongly. So I think that's important. Also, meeting transfer and accreditation requirements, that's also a challenge. And as I worked as a department chair with these transfer credits, there really is, an academic bias as to, what should be taught and how, especially in many of the classes that are transferable, because they're 100 level classes at the community college, they transfer. Working through those academic biases is important. So I think that that's a challenge, and it'll continue to be a challenge, but having things like what she just said about book clubs and just making further awareness throughout faculty and across the spectrum of all these different fields of study, I think is really important to sort of break that down and open people's ideas, so that these accreditation requirements and transfer requirements aren't blocking what we can do. And hand in hand with that is this challenge of reworking the curriculum rather than and restructuring it rather than just adding on to it. That is a task. For example, with the Western art history, I can add on a global or an Indigenous chapter, but that's just adding on instead of really restructuring it and really thinking about it. Within art history, for example, can I teach a Renaissance and include what was happening as colonialization was taking place at the same time? So rather than just teaching the Renaissance and saying, wow, all this gold showed up and Spain had a time of, art flourishing because they were wealthy. Well, why were they wealthy? They were wealthy because this gold was coming from the New World, and literally the gold was melted down from the Aztecs and utilized in the Escorial, which is the palace of the Spanish monarchy. So there's things like that that I think is really important to think about rather than just adding on to the end of the curriculum. And I'm sure that applies in many other fields as well. That's just one example from the field that I know best. But I'm sure the same is true for many different fields. So I think that that's something that really needs to be considered as we're working on these open resources. This is a really good time for us as academics to look at these things and see if they can actually be restructured. It takes a little more time and work, that's for certain, but I think that it's worthwhile. So that's kind of my little, that's a little preachy maybe, but that's my take on it. So thank you.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, to hear what you have to say. Thanks, Linda. Let's see. Oops. There we go.
Mahalo. Yeah, Linda, that's that's a perfect segue, I think, talking about restructuring, because I really think that that's a lot of the work that I'm trying to, or I'm interested in talking about or thinking about is, and it's sort of naturally just led me here as to what are the foundations with which we're working within the academy, and what are the origins with which we've come here as well. And so one of the big questions that I've been really trying to ask myself and my colleagues is, thinking about what knowledge are we centering when we're in the library? What knowledge are we centering and even beyond the library within the academy? And so how do we shift that center beyond just thinking about this one point of view, this one narrative that we have of folks coming in and finding all this information about this Indigenous place, in my case, of course, in Hawaii, and telling the narrative through the resources that we have available here in the library, through the curriculum that was then created based on those explorations and that extraction of knowledge, rather than that, and then shifting it back to what does a Kanaka or Indigenous centered worldview look like when we think about our education systems and our libraries. And that's really a lot of the work of what my knowledge organization, the project that I'm working on with this really incredible team of Hawaiian librarians here in Hawaii, is really asking is, rather than using the Library of Congress system of organization, what would a Hawaii-centered organization system look like? And so, you know, today we know that our informational repositories just house and have so much power because they preserve so much of the cultural documents, books, artifacts, heritage materials that are just so important for us to conduct our research about Hawaii. And so it also is really just like it's really important for us to critically think about what epistemology or what worldview is that representing. Even if you look at some of our libraries today, our state library, our academic libraries, they're even modeled after Western models. The architecture itself is even modeled after Western models. We have these huge columns in front of our Hawaii State Library and even the original archives building. And so, you know, I think it's such an important metaphor to think about when you're stepping into those spaces. It is a portal, and what are you stepping into rather than a traditional hale or a traditional looking building? We're stepping into these buildings that are extremely reminiscent of other types of architecture that are not originally from here. And so that's really reflective of the knowledge that's inside. And so it's that kind of stuff that I'm really trying to zoom out and think about in most of the projects and most of the work that I'm doing. You can move to the next slide, I think, Lori. One really important example of this is just how our narratives are told. On the left-hand side, you can see an example of Library of Congress subject headings. In 1893, the Kingdom of Hawaii was illegally overthrown by a contingent of American businessmen. And for a very long time, the Library of Congress was using the subject heading at the top, Revolution of 1893, to describe any kind of material that was even in any way related to that event. And so I believe it was in the 90s, we had this wonderful cataloger who was able to shift that and petition to make that change. She was able to demonstrate to the Library of Congress that the Revolution of 1893 is actually not how the people of this place think about this really historically traumatic event. Rather, it was the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy. She didn't include illegal. Many of us as Native Hawaiians recognize that and have, you know, been able to learn quite a bit now about what actually happened then. But the fact that we can shift that language from revolution to overthrow is just one really small but powerful example of when our students are looking for materials about this event. Looking at something that says revolution as opposed to overthrow can really shift the way that they engage with those materials. And so it was really an important example for us when we were in library school to see what the power is in libraries. The slide on the right is actually a photo of my father. Sorry, I get emotional every time I talk about the story, but when I was in library school, I started, my dad has really bought into the American assimilation narrative. And so he moved away to California when he was, for his career, to sort of move up and in his profession, and didn't raise my brother and I with a whole lot of Hawaiian knowledge. But for whatever reason, my whole growing up, I would participate in whatever I could. And that's what ended up bringing me to UH Hilo in the first place, to pursue a Hawaiian Studies degree, despite the fact that I maybe knew 3 Hawaiian words. And I had visited quite a bit, but it was we were very much a local family. We weren't so much immersed in a Hawaiian cultural context in the way that I was raised. But once being in the collection and being going into library school, a lot of the practice, my dad, told me, oh, well, maybe you should do our genealogy. Maybe you should be the one to carry on our genealogy work. And so I was able to practice quite a bit doing this, learning the skills that I was learning in library school by kind of looking through many of our repositories here in Hawaii, looking for my ancestors. And one of those initiatives was working with the Bishop Museum. I was able to look through their things, and I was able to find some of our ancestors in these really incredible photos of my kupuna from 1920. Which are I was extremely lucky, and I was extremely excited to be able to share this with my family, not really understanding the full origins of what that collection was, which was a eugenics study that was done by a man from the east coast of the United States who had come to photograph and do busts of the native Hawaiian, and then presented at a eugenics conference in 1921. Bishop Museum has historically had a little bit of a harmful interaction with our Native people, despite the fact that it is one of the most important institutions in Hawaii as far as housing and making available some of our Hawaiian knowledge. But there has not always been a easy relationship between Native Hawaiian communities and this institution. The example that I'm about to talk about, though, was one really, really incredible example of Native Hawaiian archivist that's there, and someone that was in the archaeology department deciding to take these photos and curate a museum exhibition using these photos, but also using it to talk about the harmful past and the harmful actions that the Bishop Museum, as well as other institutions and academia in and of itself, has taken upon itself. And the reason that I have it here is because the only reason that I was able to even know that this collection existed and was part of this exhibit was because I was in library school, was because I decided to pursue a higher degree of education, which many people don't do that. And therefore these collections are inaccessible and unavailable to people because they are not able, they're not even thinking about doing this kind of work in this way necessarily. And it is not necessarily a priority because there's been such a huge break in our ability to access this knowledge. It has not, similar to my dad, it has not been transmitted down. And so this huge break reflects this huge lack of information that many people are just not prioritizing anymore because we were told to buy into this academy, buy into education, buy into going and being laborers and finding careers that no longer prioritize Hawaiian knowledge. And so this photo is an example to me of my dad, who his mother and his grandmother passed away when his mother was very, very young. And so there was no opportunity for them to pass on the knowledge of who these kupuna were or who these people were. And therefore he didn't pass that on to me. And it took 3 more generations for us to find these people and for them to be able to be prominently displayed in this Bishop Museum. And so for me, it was a really powerful moment to bring my father, who still lives in California, to this exhibit and be able to talk to him about these people and just show him that this is important and that this is something that we need to, that this is the power of libraries and this is the power of us being able to have agency and authority in these collections again. Sorry, it's so weepy. And then if you can go to the next slide, I think I have one more. Mm-hmm. Kind of going back to the work that we've been doing with this difficult knowledge learning community. Again, our mentor, Eiko Kosasa, is just really, really incredible. She's retired now, living her best life, but she's political science at Leeward Community College. And she, prior to, or maybe right after she retired, she wrote this really incredible small article that's not publicly available, but I am quoting it here. So I'm so sorry, I can't share it with you because I think she potentially is going to publish it. So, but she wrote this article for our campus and people that were interested in coming to hear us talk about why this is important. And in it, she makes this really incredible quote that many of my Hawaiian colleagues and myself just felt so seen by this quote. And I share it here because I think that this is just really an incredible example of what it takes to be an Indigenous person within the academy and within these Western institutions. And so she says, "Please note that our Hawaiian colleagues are not just working to uplift our college, but have primary responsibilities to uplift their people as a nation. They're all doing this within settler colonialism that is simultaneously working to erase them as a nation. As settlers, we do not carry that heavy weight. And I think that was really, really powerful for us because we recognize that not everyone has to opt in to do this work. And so, Linda, you're really an incredible example of someone who has chose to opt in and to do this work. And there are people that are willing to do it, but the truth is that anyone can opt out at any time. But those of us who are Indigenous to our homelands, we really, it's much heavier if we decide to opt out. It's much, much heavier if we decide to opt out. And so there's a lot more at stake for us, it feels like. And so for someone to be able to acknowledge this was really, really powerful for us. And I think is really an important endorsement for why OER is one really incredible tool that we can use, one very small step towards this that we can use. And I won't say that I don't think that OER is without its issues systemically and in its origins, because I do think it's a product of the Academy also. However, I do think that there's many, many opportunities to utilize that to further and improve our situation for Indigenous peoples. And I'll talk about that a bit during my successes part. It's not all doom and gloom over here, but mahalo.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your heart as well.
Thanks, Anna Marie, for that. And when you said stepping into the architecture, I think that's really important. That's such a small thing for us as non-native people. Those of you who are non-native, you probably don't even think twice about that. But when I've walked into institutions or taken my students on field trip, all of a sudden it's like, bam, right? You realize it. And I know that, that might sound naive on my part, but really it's really difficult to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And it's so obvious when, I've taken my students to the university, how that even architecture, like you said, it really does make a difference. So again, I'm glad you're doing the work you're doing as well. And so onward to successes. So this does offer this opportunity for us to open up our curriculum and to really, I put development there because I feel like it is like restructuring. We often call it curriculum development when we're working on our curriculum. Just knowing that there are more resources out there. Librarians are an awesome, resource in themselves. And that, when I, look across and you have to do a little bit of digging, but, librarians can be a great help to find these, types of resources that are available. Learning, what terminology is utilized, what's available out there. There's many more Indigenous speakers, community members that are sharing things that you can find now on the internet. That is a big plus side. When I first started to teach this class, History of Global Indigenous Visual Cultures, I had a textbook, and the textbook was addressed to non-Indigenous people, and it frankly, it felt ridiculous sometimes to be reading some of this because, these people, it was not addressing my students. So once I started digging and finding things, they were there, and our librarian helped. And that's really important. Because there are Indigenous voices, on the internet in different places that you can find. You just have to be willing to put a little time and energy into it. But also learning from my students and learning from the whole community at my college and the community of the Tohono O'odham people, who are often very generous with sharing what they know and sharing resources that I didn't know were available when I started as an instructor. So I think really, asking people to share, and the students themselves, for me, have been a really important component because they're, happy to share, some information that they have. So it can be done, and I think it's so worthwhile really and truly, to have the community of people come together and to add to the curriculum. And I think that that could be done within any field of study. So and the availability again it's growing and growing, and I think that the idea of utilizing these resources is something that again it breaks out of our usual academic, can I, but now we can cite elders. It is totally possible. So so that's I think some of the success. And again, during COVID, we had time to do this, and now that it's started, I think that more and more people are out there that are interested. So to see these types of learning communities, I think is really important. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Oops. There we go.
Well, hello, everyone. And I saw that someone was able to share the article of Eagle's article in the chat. You guys are amazing finding that. I didn't realize it was still up. If you could just be discreet with using that knowledge, because I believe she's planning on publishing it, and I don't believe that she has any copyright, or I mean, not copyright, but I don't think she's given it a label yet. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of keeping it to yourself for the moment. I believe that she's still kind of exploring what she's going to do about that. Oh, okay. Thank you, Laura. Yeah. I wasn't sure. Yeah, again, it's mostly just maybe I'm being a little bit hesitant because I don't know I haven't talked to her, touch base about it in a while, but last I heard a few months ago, she was kind of looking towards that. So just, yeah, be discreet. Thank you so much. Anyways, okay, so successes. So I have really, I think being a part of OER and just thinking about how Indigenous knowledge shows up in the classroom and just in a really, really more tangible way. I have really had an incredible opportunity to be able to collaborate with some of our faculty and work on some really, really incredible projects on localizing our content. I refer to the LibGuide that you see there, looking at projects, how we can one, up maybe our literacy about our places and our Aina in all spaces. And if you're in an institution that's on an Indigenous place, as Hawaii is, how can you better incorporate that knowledge and think about Aina-based knowledge within your courses? And so one of the projects that I was able to work on with many other faculty at Leeward was developing resources that actually are robustly talk about the place that we live and the resources that exist there, but also talking largely about the concept of Aina-based education so that people can think about that and think about how that shows up in their courses. I've also had an incredible opportunity to work with some of our faculty on open pedagogy and open textbook projects. And so one of those I was able to talk about recently at OE Global. I worked with Daniela Elliott as well as Alyssa McDonald, both PhDs. They both are instructors for biology. Daniela teaches botany in Hawaii, and so she and one of her colleagues, they developed this really incredible textbook that is very, very squarely about botany in Hawaii, and she uses open pedagogy in her courses to allow students to take photos of things that they're learning about within their actual environment and upload them to Wiki EDU. She's also worked on developing videos using interviews with some of the folks within the community, and has incorporated, I worked with her to incorporate historical photos and just develop, put other resources into that work that allows her to teach her course and really restructure her course, as you were talking about, Linda, to be very, very much centered on the Hawaii landscape and the Hawaii environment, and specifically to where our students are living, which is primarily the leeward coast of Oahu. And so that's just been such an awesome example of how this this really translates really, really well to the classroom and how you can let your students lead in a lot of ways as well. I worked with Alyssa as well on some of her zoology projects. They've been doing a whole lot of work. And if you were at Open Education Global recently, we got to hear about hear from Siobhan. Oh, I forgot her name now, but she's done so much work with Wikimedia and talked quite a bit about the power of Wikipedia and how we can update those and crowdsource the information that's really, really available. And I worked with Alyssa and one of her colleagues, Anushka, to help them develop their assignments on updating some of our species Wikipedia pages that are specific to Hawaii species, and their students work on that together. And so we've been collaborating. And so again, it's just been really, really powerful to see how being aware of our Hawaii resources and collaborating with faculty just has so much potential and has really, really just been not just potential for our students, but has developed in really great relationships as well. And I think that that's a big part of what OERs are as well. I am a librarian. This is my work to help find the resources that folks need on our campuses. But I think beyond that, the relationship building and the reciprocity between our work and with being able to sort of lift one another up in these ways has been a hallmark of the work that I've been able to do with our faculty as a librarian. Oftentimes it feels like wanting to incorporate Indigenous knowledge into your course. It seems that you just reach out to the Hawaiian Studies faculty or the Indigenous scholars on your campus, and they should want to help you, right? That's really not the case all the time. It really takes quite a bit of relationship building. It also takes the understanding that those folks, as I talked about with Aiko's quote, those folks are often very much working on their own projects that include nation building, but also are part of their own initiatives that they have prioritized in their own work and their own profession. And so really coming in and saying, indigenize my work, indigenize my curriculum is not helpful. And so these two have been really, really incredible examples of I'm already doing all of this work. I've already invested myself in a lot of professional development. I've done a lot of work to find this on my own, but I do need a little bit of support in these particular areas. And also having already worked with them in various projects has just made it so much easier to want to support and to know the impact that the work is going to have on our students and our communities. And I think that's a really important component of Indigenous knowledge and OER. Lastly, the project, the photo on the bottom is a photo of the Leeward Community College Library. We had the opportunity to think about what all of our windows were not tinted at all in our library. And so we wanted to kind of incorporate something there that would be an art project that would be something that we could just highlight things. And so when I heard about this project, I thought, oh, okay, maybe this is an opportunity for us to really think about what are the stories that exist that are reflected within our AINA, and how can we use this as a way to talk about this. And so this became a cross-collaborative effort between the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee at Leeward Community College, our library committee, as well as our marketing folks, our art department. And so we were able to collaborate with Erica Molino, who is one of our digital art instructors, and she presented a assignment to her course of these are the specs of this. You're going to be working on digital art. I did a session for them where they were able to learn a little bit more about our resources, but also our mo'olelo, or our stories of that place. And they took all of that and presented a whole bunch of designs. And we ended up choosing one of the students, Taylor Wilson, her design, which is a mosaic inspired design. This is a window vinyl, and there are two sharks that are highlighted there. As you know, we're on the shores of Keavalauapu'uloa, or Pearl Harbor, and one of the most prominent stories that we have is about our sharks that live in that bay who protect the people of that place. In particular, the main shark is a female shark named Ka'ahupahau and her brother Kahiuka, and they and their sort of group of sharks really are the ones that protect that whole bay. And our our stories about that area get overrun by the stories of the American occupation and military being there, and of course the attack on Pearl Harbor. And this was an opportunity for us to be able to highlight a different narrative for our students who are primarily Native Hawaiian. We have quite a few military students there. We have a lot of local students that are there. And so this was an opportunity where there's not much art that exists on our campus for us to plaster this in our windows. And it was just such an incredible experience to be able to do this. And so I love talking about this because I do feel like this is a successful story of us being able to incorporate localized Aina-based education within the classroom. So yeah, I think that's all I have for this one. Mahalo.
Thank you. And so, Linda, what do you see as the future of your work, or bits and pieces?
Do I have a slide for that or not?
Is it not? Is not sharing?
No, it's not sharing.
Oh no, I see it. It's right there.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. Okay. I don't know why I don't see it, but that's okay. All right. So, oh, I don't, it's weird. All right. So I'll just go on because I have some notes here. So, scholarship within the field, is one thing that I've been working on, within, art history and really looking, like I said, to find information and to find sources. As an academic, which I'm sure many of you are, I actually enjoy researching and finding new ways to teach my coursework. So that's something that I continue to do. Working with continuing to look at these 4-year institutional transfers, I think that's very important. And to hopefully, have it a little more open as to the structure and what's considered transferable, so that not just that as a tribal college, I'm adhering to the university, but vice versa, that there's more reciprocity in that relationship, I think is really important. I have that the flower, the cactus flower, that's the colors of our school actually. And it's one of the flowers that we often see around campus. We have many of these in the Sonoran Desert. But it's this idea again, that, and I think you said it really good, that idea of relationship and reciprocity, that you're not just like going out to the peripheral, which often happens in academia or in the arts, and taking things. That it's this idea that you're opening from the center, that you're open to exchange, rather than this idea that, oh, I'm going to go get this knowledge and add it in, right? I think that idea of relationship, and there's knowledge that is not privy to be shared. There's I know that there's several resources that I've looked at, where the tribal knowledge is it's not made to be shared or appropriated by other people. So I think always checking with that, always making sure that that's an appropriate use of that knowledge. And if it's not, then it's not incorporated. You can still mention it, right? You can still say these people have a process for this, right? And it's not to be shared. And I think that's important, because it should be through a relationship, not through this idea that you're going to go from add this on and just not have that opening. So that idea that you're open like a flower, right? There's reciprocity, right? It's not just this bee coming in and taking, or vice versa, right? So I think that's really important. So to me, those types of relationships, and although oftentimes, as many Westerners, I want to get things done and do things in a hurry, that's not the case. We have time to work on this. If you don't have the time to add things in, or if you're not sure if that knowledge should be shared or if that's appropriate use, just wait. There's always next semester. There's but as long, I think, as learning, that's what, learning to do things in their own time is something that I think I've been taught, because I did not have that. I still don't always, but I think that that's really a smart approach. And, as long as you're opening to listening and forming those relationships, I think it's really important. So, and if you can add to that, that would be great, because I'm only speaking from my own experience. So thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
That was really beautiful. Thank you so much, Linda. That was a really beautiful metaphor, the opening from the center. I really thank you so much for talking about that. And I think just to finish up, because I know we're running short on time, I think for me, a future looks like a bit of this, and just thinking about what settlers can do. I think OER is a hugely important tool. It's a hugely important aspect that we can use to incorporate more Indigenous knowledge into our curriculum for the betterment of our students, but for the betterment of our communities as a whole. And so this is just some of the recommendations that we've got, of course. And then I've got a photo of Wade, who's no longer my boss, which is very sad, but he is just really, really been such a huge thought partner for me in just working out a lot of this material and just thinking about what we do, what we're doing in the academy and what we're doing in libraries. And so he, for me, is a model of a settler who is really trying his hardest to figure out and grapple with these major questions. And so I am just eternally grateful for my relationship with Wade and my ability to have worked with him so deeply in some of these really, really hard and difficult conversations. One of the things that we've, talked about with ACO is just what can settlers do, and often I think that there's a lot of like, I don't want to make a mistake. I really don't want to be making a mistake or step on anybody's toes or further the harm that I've already caused. And I think actually the instinct should be more of actually stepping into the work as opposed to stepping back from it. I think there is a need for Indigenous people to lead in the ways that they want to be. They want to be talked about in their narratives, the way that they want their nation to run. However, I think there are major privileges that settlers are able to push forward. OER is a great example of that. I think looking at policies and being able to use your voice in a way that will be heard, and push for equity and push for better policies that allow for Indigenous peoples to be able to thrive better, push for more Indigenous peoples at faculty levels and administrative levels, and just think about some of those major things that is a lift off of Indigenous people's plates. And I think that there is so much space for that. And I think that there are opportunities for us to develop really meaningful relationships, to do really meaningful work. And I think it's just a matter of outlining what that is. And so thinking really, really hard about what you do and what you do well, and how can that be a contributor to this whole process and this whole thinking about Indigenous knowledge and what it means to be in a good relationship with the folks that were here. And so I think the next slide, for me, a future also looks like thinking about what libraries look like when we shift that center back to a Native perspective. And back in, I think it was 2019, is that what that says? Yeah, 2019, I was able to be a co-author with some really amazing rock star librarians, Kavena Komeiji, Siobhan Matsuda, Kehahi Long, and Kapena Shim. We interviewed about 17 Hawaiian Studies scholars, and I interviewed them about their relationship with libraries and what that relationship has historically looked like. And it wasn't very good. What we found is it wasn't very good. And so we came up with these recommendations. These are 4 of the recommendations that we came up with, which is really directly pointed at UH administration and how libraries can better serve and better create a relationship with our Hawaiian Studies scholars and our Hawaiian students. And some of this is very blatant and blunt about what it is that we need to be better thriving in our environment. And I am lucky enough to be in relationship with these people who are just not scared to say those kinds of things. And it's really helped me to be better and not scared about saying what our truth is as well. And, of course, none of these things have happened. It's been 5 years and none of these things have really happened, but we've made progress. Our library council is moving towards incorporating these recommendations into the way that UH libraries operate as a whole. And so I'm really looking forward to a future where this can be more meaningfully incorporated into the work that we do every day. And that about does it for me. Mahalo.
Thank you. So we have a few minutes for questions. I'm looking only at one screen here, so I'm not seeing the questions. Let's see, is B.
Hi.
Anybody? Hi. Have you
Um,
found any questions? I think we maybe have time for one or two.
actually I had to restart my computer, so all the chat went away with it. I
Okay.
know that they had asked for some of the slides to be on available and Heather did that. And I did not um remember the rest of the chat.
Okay. So, yes, the slides, the recording and the slides are available soon after, I think a few days or so after the webinar, so you can always access it in a future time. And
There
I believe Liz puts the chat with links on there as well if you want to.
there is a
Um,
question. What advice would you offer before exploring a project that the University of Arizona are interested in publishing recipes from uh, tribal community members as OER?
mhm.
I think that's actually a good question for the librarian, because really, um, that those types of information, of course, I would say, working with those people that wrote those recipes would be my first inclination. But as a librarian, would you have any advice?
That's pretty much where I was going to go as well. As I think that one of the most important things that you can do is develop good practices where you're already in communication with the community members. If that relationship already exists, then cold calling these community members and asking them to publish your recipes will be much less jarring if you're already in a relationship with them. And so my recommendation would be to, if you have established relationships with them, please do, be in communication with them. I think one of the biggest things that Native communities have a problem with the Academy is the lack of transparency and the continuation of these extractive and harmful practices that have gotten us here in the first place. And so if we can do the most to remedy that through maybe even over communicating, and not doing it without their permission. I think having their permission is a really important component, and I think it doesn't necessarily align with what OER talks about. And I think that maybe is sort of reflective too of the protocols around information within your own communities. I think the examples that I talked about with Daniela and Alyssa, right? A lot of that information is easily accessible within our libraries and within our institutions already, and is information that's very, very important and needed within our communities for their work to be done. If these tribal recipes have protocols around them, then that is maybe going to be a much more complicated conversation that you're going to be having with those community members. And so for me, my inclination is always going to be, talking and creating a relationship with them. And if those folks are no longer alive, then I would try and communicate with either their descendants or the community that they belong to, because again, it could be really, really powerful for health reasons and all kinds of things. But I think the most important thing is giving Indigenous peoples authority over how their information is used.
And I see in the chat, somebody named Robert Lawson just wrote, "Nothing about us without us," which is a very
Good.
succinct way to think about it and to say that. So thank you,
Right.
Robert.
Yeah, that came out in one of the keynotes as well this weekend, and I absolutely subscribe to that. That is I think we're in a space now where that should be a rule of thumb.
Mm. Mm. Let's see if we we have time for maybe one more question. I don't see any. I will. Let's see if you do have questions, as Heather noted in the chat, please join the CCCOER community listserv. Again, it's a really busy, happy, sharing community that has lots of information.
And Marie, I also saw that this work that you're doing is part of your strategic plan going into 2029 for your university. So I always wondered, and I saw your name on there, is, part of that team effort. So how did that come about? Because that kind of codifies a lot of work. You can always refer back, this is part of the strategic plan. And that
Yeah.
does come with money sometimes.
Agree, agree. One of my other amazing teachers at Leeward, Momiko Mahele, always tells us, get it down in policy, get it down in writing, everything. And so she really started our Hawaiian Studies program at Leeward Community College and advocated for having our mission for a while now, have a specific part of the mission that says, with special attention to Native Hawaiians. And she knew from very early on, she was a disciple of the great Haunani Trask, and knew from very, very early on how important it is to articulate these things so that it is, we can refer back to it, just like you said, and also to put money towards it. I don't know where my name is in that strategic plan, but again, I think I probably have to give all of that up to Wade and his using his privilege and his positions at Leeward to kind of push forward the work that we were doing in the library, and just really being a thought leader on our campus. And he takes on, I think he's still the campus council chair, or maybe he's moved on now, but he was the campus council chair for about 2 years. And he really used his position there to move forward a lot of the strategic planning conversations, which was reflective of the conversations we were having in the library. And so I was the only Native Hawaiian in the library and really actively participated in those conversations, knowing that hopefully this would help to move change. But I also have to give it up to all of the Hawaiians that have been in the system before me, pushing for the university to articulate that we are an Indigenous serving university and that we are a Native Hawaiian place of learning. The truth is that many of us don't know what that means still, even those of us who are Indigenously Hawaiian that are on the campuses. However, it is still a goal, like we were just talking about. It's something that has been articulated and that allows for systems and committees and those kinds of things to be put into place so that we can work towards that. Whether or not we achieve that, the truth is a Native Hawaiian place of learning would look nothing like the buildings that we're in and the systems that we're working through. But we can get as close as possible as we can, and getting it articulated in things like strategic plans and policies, and is really the only way to move towards that in the system that we're working with. But yeah.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Please feel free to join us for the next CCCOER webinar. I want to particularly thank Linda and Anne-Marie for sharing today. I know it's very powerful what you're saying, and appreciate your truthfulness and honesty and everything that you've shared. If you wouldn't mind taking the survey before you head off, it does inform what we do with the CCCOER webinars. And again, we thank you very much. Lots of claps from here.
Thanks everybody for joining and listening. And thanks for inviting me. I really appreciated having this experience.
Yeah, just to echo that, mahalo Linda, mahalo Lori and Heather and Bea for just bringing us all in. It's been great to have this discussion, and I hope to hear from you folks again, and mahalo to everyone who came.